Welcome, everybody, to another edition of UFO Man Live. My name is Tim, or UFO Man, and my co host this evening is Tom Reed, famous for the Berkshire UFO encounter.
Thanks for having me.
Also, you're welcome. Also, coming to our channel tonight as a special guest is Jesse Marcel
Hello,
the
everyone.
third. He is the grandson of Major Jesse Marcel, the infamous person who laid hands on the Roswell crash debris and brought it home and showed it to his family. Also, we have a special guest along with Jesse, a friend of his by the name of Dan Howie. He used to be a forensic investigator, correct, Dan?
Yeah, I was law enforcement for 20 years and then do forensic art, skull reconstructions, that kind of stuff.
Well, welcome to the panel, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. We're glad to have you on UFO Man. Tonight, we're going to start out with a question from Tom Reed in regards to Jesse. So take it away, Tom.
Wow, put me on the spot. Well, I've known Jesse a while.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what's it been, like 7, 8 years, I guess.
Oh, quite a while.
Yeah, and I met your father, and usually when we've met, but we don't really talk that much because we're usually both doing something. And what I hear and what I get bits and pieces from all these different people who tell me basically about your family's incident. Basically, your father is key in that, or grandfather. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure.
And so this might be the first time to really hear your side of things, because it's either in one book or another book, or I'm watching a special on Travel Channel, and yeah, it'd be nice to hear in your words what you think he held, and what.
Well, sure. Well, I can start off with most of this kind of conversation on this topic is, as I was growing up, I was indoctrinated in the story, and what always interested me the most, this is from my grandfather. Story. Do you want to like to run through the story in just a very quick sense?
Sure.
Something crashed out in the desert out of Roswell back in 1947 by Atacama. Some of the debris was picked up by a local ranch hand, basically, and brought to the local police station. They didn't know what to make of it. Brought to the Roswell police. They didn't know what to make of it. They got hold of base. My grandfather was the head of intelligence at that Army base, the 509th in Roswell, Mexico. That's how my grandfather got involved. He went down to the police officer, down to the police station, looked at the debris himself, and thought, this is interesting. And and he said, well, let's, what do you guys want to do with it? Well, my grandfather went back and reported to his boss, Colonel Blanchard, and they said, let's send you out there, and with another gentleman, he's basically a disinformation officer. Somebody to write the story, and that gentleman wasn't a military person. He was a government, and they went out there to take a look at what this rancher had seen. Part of that story is the rancher had heard there was a big lightning storm, a big storm the night before, and he heard a huge crash. The story goes, it shook the windows in the little cabin he was in out on the plane, and the next morning he was out riding his horse. And he came up on a bunch of cattle. I think they're sheep, actually, something like that. And they refused to cross the field. And he looked in the field and had a bunch of shiny debris. And he went down there to look, and they were trying to get to a water source, but they weren't willing to go through it to get to the water source. So he ended up by guiding me around. In that, he thought, well, this is strange, and this is what I heard last night. And he packed up a little bit, and then that's how it actually originated, to get to the people to look at it. Grandfather went out and looked at, I think it was about an hour drive out of Roswell to go look at that stuff. And I always think a little bit how interesting it would have been in his eyes to think that, something's out here. We don't know what it is. They did a quick, cursory look. They didn't see there was no downed aircraft. There was nothing like that of the sort, just something odd. Didn't know what to make of it. He went out there, and when they got out he was actually in a family car, and the other gentleman was in a Jeep. Got into the field, and he started to assess it, and he noticed it for his report, and he thought it was fairly remarkable. Covered quite a large area, shape of a triangle, so it looked like it had an impact, and then it kind of sprayed out from there. In that debris, he found something a lot of people have talked about is this shiny like foil. It's a very, very thin foil. I would look at it more like modern day Mylar. You can in your hand and fold it up, and and let it go. It goes back to being a flat sheet, that kind of thing. Yeah, that people talk about that quite a bit.
Yeah, they do.
And then there were beams of all lengths, 4 inches, 4 feet long, those kind of things.
What kind of beams? Like poles? Oh, like that. Okay.
Yep, something like that. That's actually not that's not exactly a representation was like, but it was an I beam. It had an I cross section. It wasn't nearly as big as that, but what was been told to me anyway. And basically, all these are strewn all over. Lots of plastic, like a burnt out plastic. There was lots of like a burnt plastic. My father, not my grandfather, always termed that as bakelite, which in that era, bakelite was countertop. The formica that's used now is like all the
counters.
Yeah, I think it was using radios and all kinds of stuff. Lots of that, and then just lots and lots of like a fiber optic kind of material. There was lots strewn through it, lots of stuff like fiber optic stuff. So he went through and he looked at it and he said, through a number of people and us too, it's like that whatever it was, he felt like it just from that cursory observation that it wasn't made by human hands. That's kind of what kicked off a lot of it. Is that statement by itself. He thought it was significant enough that when he returns to make his report, it's going to be vacuumed up. It's going to be gone. It's going to be gone through very carefully. But who knows if anybody's going to see it again in the civilian world.
Right.
And that was where, and you figure, here's an intelligence officer, head of intelligence during the Second World War. This gentleman, my grandfather, actually directed the boxcar where it was going to drop the nuclear bomb. He met with a crew, and it was an interesting story. They actually all signed a $1 bill that if they were to live through that he owed them a snort of liquor, so they call it a short snorter, when they returned. It was pretty good. That was my grandfather. He was liked by, very liked by all, very friendly, very Southern gentleman, very, very, he was a very intelligent guy, but very, in the thing, he enjoyed his family, he enjoyed his friends, he enjoyed being in the military. And so he boxed some of it up with that he was going to return to make his report and his report. But he thought, I'm going to show basically my family because they'll probably never have a chance to see something like that again in their lifetime. So he stopped by their house, and it's somewhere between 12 and 2 in the morning.
He stopped by the guy's house and reported it.
What's that?
He stopped by the guy's house that reported it originally.
No, he stopped by his house.
Oh, okay.
His house in Homa.
Okay.
I'm not in Homa. I'm sorry. His house in Roswell.
Okay.
He had a house in Homa.
All right, I got to ask you a couple questions real quick.
Please.
So they had sheep or cows or what was it they had that wouldn't cross?
It's some kind of cattle. I've been told, that I was obviously, it was a number of years ago when I learned about it, but it was like cat. It was whatever they're herding some kind of cattle.
But they would normally cross, and this particular day they wouldn't.
Right. Yeah. It figures it's a big field and there's water where they're going to a water hole of some kind that they're trying to get to. But this material scared them enough that they were not willing to cross the field to get to their water.
You think it was putting off something that they were sensing that was different than what they were accustomed to?
Yeah, very much so. If they would refuse, they needed the water. Anybody been to Roswell, New Mexico? It's pretty hot, dry air, that kind of thing. So they were trying to get us water, but they refused to.
And they found fiber optic tubing. Or
fiber optic, lots and lots of just like that, but all kinds of it. One thing that was unique about the fiber optics is the fiber optic type material had some kind of a coating on it, so it wouldn't look like a piece of strand of glass to you or I unless you look at it or take a better look at it. And it's interesting that that fiber optics kind of came into what it uses not too long after this, actually.
We didn't have fiber.
But
we didn't have fiber until what, the 70s?
Where it was useful. They did it for, Romans had it. They sent light through water in channels, so you could actually, the idea of fiber optics has been around for a long time, but they could never send information through it. it was never, they could never, they never were able to use it as a good formidable source compared to copper wire.
Right, because you
But
need
you
it.
found
Right.
out if you put a coating on it, guess what? Now you could.
So
And, again, speculation, coincidence, probably, who knows?
no,
but
I just think it's interesting because I'd never heard that the animals wouldn't cross, and
Nope.
I'd never heard the part about the fiber before, which really wasn't commercially used in the 40s.
No, it wasn't.
And
I remember because my father's wife, Linda, had a kind of a long conversation with my grandfather just about that fiber optic stuff. But and we all talked amongst the family, but there was a lot. Like I said, I'm not quite sure everything that's been brought out. I have a book out. It's been quite a few years now, a number of years out, and we kind of go into some of that stuff, but from a family side.
right.
But it's significant. It's interesting. There's so many pieces of this puzzle that, I'm sure a lot of them are just nothing more than coincidence. But I have a hard time believing that it's all this coincidence.
Right.
I read in an article, we were talking backstage about the final estimate of the situation about Roswell. And in that article, that long, overblown article, was a comment that was made about the area of the site of the crash, that one of the animals in the area had been struck and killed. Now, I don't know if that was one of the cattle or if that was a deer or what, but it was at the crash site.
And that story, it was talked about in the early 70s. And then it kind of went away. And I think National Geographic actually has that story somewhere online. And I just, in going through as I became more involved in the story, it was, when it's part of your family, it's kind of a different, it's a different thing than somebody somewhere else. And it's not like, it's just one of those things, like, so we talked about it. What might seem significant outside of our family wasn't that significant inside. It was like, oh, that's interesting. And that story about, they actually found, blood and that kind of thing of some kind of a dead animal in it. And it predisposes, how far we're going to go. Was an animal, was there actually some kind of thing alive in that craft when it hit? Who knows? But I shouldn't say it. Somebody knows. but that was part of it. It was interesting that the debris was strong enough that assuming it wasn't there before it was impacted, that it was significant to kill something in its path.
I'm sorry. What do you make of your grandfather was highly decorated. He knew what he was doing. I seldom ever see any kudos to him and his career, and I see him holding up the foil, and it's almost like, or what they word it as that, and I'm thinking, how disrespectful, in my opinion,
it is. There's, and my sister Denise, she's a little bit more on that side of it. It's like, this guy went through a lot, and he honestly kind of fell on the sword. He knew when he walked into that room where some of those pictures were taken. Yeah. At first, he thought the same thing as he's going on this hallway. MP's on his side. I'm envisioning that. I'm not sure if that's real or not, but going on this highway, you're going to be directed to this thing. He's saying, "Sir, we're going to take some pictures with the debris." He thought, "Oh, yeah." And he thought himself, "My goodness, they're going to bring this out and talk to people about it." He's like, "Wow!" And when he walked in the room, and you see, like, there was even an envelope for a balloon in there. There was all kinds of stuff, and he goes, "Okay." So he went there and did this, and then again, attributing to my sister Denise, if you look at those pictures closely, he's staring not at the camera, but at somebody who's barking at him, giving him orders. There's nothing. So he was told, basically, and like I said, he was a high-ranking, military official, very respected of intelligence, but there was still be, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. And that's kind of, that was where the story changed. Yeah, they're right there. And there's about a half dozen of him. There's a couple of them there and those are some of Raimi.
Almost looks like he's looking at it, almost laughing, like, seriously, really? It's kind of like, yeah.
There is, and it's just like, one thing he did say, there was a couple of pieces in there that were actually from the site.
No, a couple pieces.
It wasn't 100% garbage, but mostly, and that's a raw one target. And you can see foil with the balsa sticks that are taped to it, stuff. I said, again, a very simple thing. It had a very high level of secrecy behind it, but it was, at the end of the day, there wasn't a whole lot to it. It was a tape recorder, tinfoil, and that kind of thing.
tell me about that sound that guy heard, because again, a weather balloon, which no one ever filed an insurance claim, for this missing weather balloon either, right? So this so-called weather balloon wouldn't crash and make an impact like that either.
No, like I said, there was we laughed about it when it came out around the family at home. I wouldn't say laugh; that might be a little bit over the top, but it was like these things were Rowan targets and weather balloons and all these things. They had little tags in them, and as a kid, you're like given, hey, if you find one of these in the field, we'll give you $1 or whatever. And like I said, these things would, once they crumple up, they'll fit. I was direct. They'll fit in a garbage can, and a lot of times they'll say thank you and they'll note it down. They won't even come pick it up. They just get thrown away.
Right.
So there was, there is some interesting correlations between the Rowan target project and my grandfather, but in that same token, head of intelligence, he knew about this program. So it makes it like he's making it up and everybody around him makes it up. And it's the biggest conspiracy in history, or one of the biggest ones. And everybody got together and see, including a lot of people in town of Roswell, that we're going to make this story up and fool the world, or there was something to it. And it's just hard to imagine that everybody blindly, I mean, there's talks, I want to get back, I don't want to get too far out of the way here about the story, but it's like there's so many pieces. Could it have all been something else? Of course it could have been. But is it likely if that, the KISS, it seems more likely that it was something very unusual.
I know we want to circle back around, but real quick. So why would all the personnel be dispatched? The money that had, right, Dan, the money that had to cost our government to dispatch all those people. And if they really believed that this was nothing from the beginning, no one would have ever showed up.
No.
So why do you invest that kind of money for, like you had said, a moment ago, Jess, for a weather balloon that they would have thrown away anyway?
Never. Even all this stuff, they never treated any of the stuff like this. This is the only one, and it's just like, again, there's a lot of missing pieces.
Yeah.
And if you can speculate different ways, but the big one is, and we were talking, it's like, not that I talk to a lot of people about Roswell. A lot of people talk to me about this because of the namesake and, the family and that kind of thing. And I hold, some people have some ideas what it could have been outside of being UFO, but almost nobody, actually, I can't think of anybody who believes that the actual base government story. And then there was an interesting story about my growing up. We knew that the government was kind of paying attention to what we're doing as a family. Mainly my dad, but of course we were kids. And we were told, don't be surprised that on some of our conversations, there might be somebody listening to what we're saying. Mm-hmm. And we just thought, well, that's just the way it is. I don't know if it's true or not or whatever. But one time my father was setting up going to California. People have heard the story before, where the family was going to Disneyland or something like that. And he was setting it up, and he hung up the phone and then got a call back like in 30 seconds. And they said, oh, hi, Dr. Marcel, we understand you're going to be in LA on this date and you're going to be staying here. Would you have a few minutes to meet with us? And it's like, he just made that reservation and nobody else knew about it. So we know that there was some kind of people were paying attention to what he was saying. And we went down there. He went down there. He met with them, and it was the head of the Rowan Target, that program. And the whole time they were trying to convince him to come out to say it was Rowan Target. So they were still spending money and time and effort to try to convince somebody who has nothing to do with it. He was a colonel in the military. I think it was made up. He was a lieutenant colonel at that time. To tell everybody it was a Rowan Target. My father just said, it has similarities to it, but on the other side, it's not similar to it because of these reasons. And he said, I all I can tell you is that know that what you're telling me right now doesn't fit what I know of it, and not to be disrespectful, but that's what he left. And they did still come out. They said that, oh yeah, we met with Jesse, and it looks like it's confused. It might have been a Rowan Target. He never said that, but.
What I'm going to say is what we were talking about backstage, Jesse, was this little blurb here. On summer trips to visit our grandfather in Louisiana, he would add to the story. He told us that he had seen glass-like fiber optic material strewn through the debris in the field, and even what appeared to be an animal hit by the craft that had crashed. He would describe how it took 5 to 6 large 2.5-ton 6x6 cargo trucks to transport all the debris back to the base. And if that's the case, this is the truck. And
Yep.
if that's the case, that one of those Project Mogul weather balloons could fit in a garbage can, then what were they carting back? It had to have been something more in scope, size.
Well, it is, and that I attribute back to my brother John, who went in the military himself. He was deeply interested in, and this. He talked to my grandfather about exactly what we're talking about here, and that's where my grandfather did relay. It's like 5 to 6 of these things full of material, and yeah, it doesn't make sense because you could fit it all. You could fit it all in the trunk of your car, a real raw one target, and the balloons, I think they said they really deteriorate the material are made of back at that time in about 2 weeks. They would dry up and become they break up, become actually black and that kind of stuff. But it's interesting that there was, like again, back to those pictures, you actually have fresh, and a lot of the pictures that were taken the public sees that are in the historical record don't show everything in the room, but all that stuff was there. It's really interesting how they were trying to fit this idea in a keyhole, and I just didn't do a good job. And we've always, one of the most blatantly obvious things is, this hit the front of papers all over the world. So this top secret project, which Mogul was at the time, completely top secret, they were willing to show everybody in the world, yes, this is how we listen overseas, because that's the Project Mogul was. It had a tape recorder and a microphone, and those targets, because they go up above the clouds, and it would listen for atomic blasts over the ocean. That's all it was. Very simple. I assume it would work, but there was nothing. Basically the parts you could buy at a modern day Walmart, you could make a raw target if you want. But this made the front of papers. Like, why would the government go all out of the way to release a top secret, then current project to dispel what they found in the field? Again, one of the things that logic just tells you that doesn't make any sense.
And it even goes further than that, right? I mean, they probably spent millions of dollars on this disinformation campaign when we've got wounded vets that are denied $100 tooth extraction. I mean, there's a reason that they invested this kind of time and money.
Well, if you can imagine what's happened from back then to today.
Yeah.
Things are evolving. The communication, the conversations is getting a little more welcoming of this kind of thing. Sure. But it is quite interesting. I mean, there was so much, and it's like, if it was really just actually, regardless of what it was, they shouldn't have said anything. They're crazy. I mean, that would have been the end of it. It's really the government and the military that caused a lot of this to happen. It's because of their lack or their denial of creating these stories that created the interest. My grandfather, after those pictures, basically, I go back. He went back after those pictures were taken, and met with my grandmother and his wife and my dad, and sat him down and said that what you saw, what I brought here to show you, was a non-issue. It was a non-event. It did not happen. I don't want you to tell anybody about it, and it's done now. Period. And that was it. And that's literally from as far as inside the family, it was not talked about again. They were told not to talk to anybody about it. And then my grandfather did go on about a 10-day leave without the family, along with a lot of other people who were involved. So,
do you think the Roswell Daily Record kept this alive, or was there other newspapers and articles that came out that got this in the forefront? Or
I think the Roswell Daily Record had a lot to do with the beginning of it.
Right.
Stanton Friedman continued with that. He interviewed Stanton Friedman has always been a good family or a good friend of the family. And I have to say that we met his daughters in Roswell. I and Dan did. Wonderful people. And he was always steadfast. He always, like you said, Roswell has grown up to be one of those things that is always there. It's always going to be there. But it's all the amount of time, money, and effort spent. And it is one of those stories. It's somebody out there knows exactly what it is, because there was stuff picked up. It is somewhere. I mean, part of our investigation is to get part of it.
What about this second crash? Wasn't there like 2 crashes or something? Or what I'm referring to?
What happened is, where my grandfather, the idea was that's been passed on, is that he was at the first crash site. That was the impact. And then part of that, a large part of that ended up on a hillside, very low hillside, about I don't know, it was like 2 or 3 miles away. It was all the same craft, but it did, and there was actually another third part. Parts were found at another place also by the fire department. But that was it. It was like a lot of debris, yeah, it impacted there, and part of it skidded off. So it was obviously moving, assumably quickly.
There's a rumor going around the UFO community that a Doppler radar was being used at the time, and that it supposedly interfered with the two objects that crashed and broke apart, and then had different spots where it landed.
Yeah, I've heard that one before. I've heard all that stuff before. It's like, well, how could something so advanced be taken down by something like that? Or, the idea that there's a huge storm going on. It's like, but then again, our most advanced aircraft we have, things do happen. And there's also the other side to it is perhaps getting on the journey here or whatever it is, they actually are somewhat fragile. And the technology used, there's lots of, my personal interest is more on the science side of this whole project, but there could be reasons why that things are that it was very much a one-way trip for whoever did this,
and it could have been built by lowest bidder.
Well, it's
absolutely.
Like, I'm of the belief there were scientists. My dad thought that they were almost like a cross machine and biological that could travel that kind of thing.
Uncanny Valley.
Yeah, and like I said, thinking that it was a one-way mission, and that was part of it, and that which begs the question is, if they do and they came and investigate and they crashed, what information were they able to send back to wherever they were from, if they would,
I've always thought that something internally in the craft itself malfunctioned, not that it was the lightning or something, or our government shot it down, because like you said, I think that it would have had, certainly if these crafts can go from, let's say out of the multiverse, through our galaxy, through our atmosphere into the ocean, they're not fragile. So maybe something internally malfunctioned. I mean, there is that possibility.
It could be. I mean, its purpose. I mean, what if its purpose was to destroy itself? I mean, there's some. I've heard about those two. I mean, about in the 2 weeks that led up to this, there were lots of sightings of weird lights going through the sky. I liked this one about these nuns were out on their porch. They're not out. I guess porch is the right way to put it. And they saw these little blue lights flying through town, and there's all kinds of stories where kids were outside and these things would be flying by and they'd pull their kids in. And my dad even said when he was a kid, looking out the back door, he saw a blue light fly through the sky, when he was a kid. So for whatever reason, there was a lot of things going on. I think there's been some sci-fi movies written around that exact thing. But it's very interesting. Like, with me, my grandfather never speculated that it was two UFO craft. We always talked about it being one that broke up on impact, and that kind of thing. And my grandfather, like, again, one of the stories I tell is about, when they're back at the house looking at the debris. My dad is looking through the debris, and he picks up an I-beam, and if you looked at it, it looked like a very small gray piece of metal, and very lightweight and assuming fairly strong. I mean, you're a kid, I don't know if you can assess how strong it is or not. And he brought up under the kitchen light over the sink, and he looked at it, and he looked at it when it was at an angle. He saw these figures appear, these little symbols. And he said, Dad, come here. Tell me, what do you think? What do you think? And my grandfather told him that he could be the first person that's ever seen this alien language. So my grandfather really, for early on, thought that this is something that wasn't from here. And then to give an insight of how my grandfather looks at things, he told my father, my father asked him, so what do you think it says? And my grandfather's response was, well, maybe it's how to use the onboard bathroom. That's the kind of, even in what you could seem as kind of an intense, exciting, whatever situation, that was my grandfather was just that kind of exactly what you consider to be a deep Southern gentleman. So.
Well, and Tom, just to reflect back real quick on what you were saying about, the failure of something within their system.
Yes.
To me, that makes sense. And, when you also consider the storm that night,
Mhm.
if I recall correctly, it was one of the largest storms on record in that area. But I think that makes sense, at least to me, that there was some type of a system failure.
That's what I've always thought, that there was that electrical field interfered with something. The wrong something was happening simultaneously, and boom, and they couldn't correct it in time, and it happened. It just crashed. It's the only thing that makes sense to me, because if that material, you crumbled it up, you opened it up, right, and it returned back to its shape. It was really durable. Everything was strong. There's no reason that, and it had to be going at a pretty high rate of speed, if I'm not mistaken, to have had that kind of an impact.
It sure would seem too, and there is some like this the material, the foil.
Yeah.
If you are capable of, which they had to be able to get from point A to point B, through whatever it would be, through,
just getting through our atmosphere. I mean, look at our shuttles half the time,
even that
problems, and
even
that's a
the
lot of
slightest
heat.
particle would destroy the craft. But maybe this could absorb the energy, this foil, and then reshape itself, and that piece just goes. There could be all kinds of interesting assumptions made, but it's fascinating. Again, why it crashed. Probably is the simplest answer, actually.
Words, right? Actions speak louder than words. They can say whatever they want in the paper, but the way they responded, the way our government, the precautions, the level of how they, the level they went to
the vacuuming of the desert.
When you said it yourself, all they had to do was just deny the whole thing and just turn their backs and leave, but they didn't. They were so steadfast on making sure they controlled the narrative that speaks volumes to me.
Yeah, I think it was a huge mistake on their part.
Yeah, they did. I'm sure Dan feels the same way.
Also, the vacuuming of the desert. I mean, how many people get out there with a vacuum and vacuum it all up?
Right. For a $50 weather balloon?
Yeah, a weather balloon and a tinfoil target.
Yeah, ridiculous.
I thought it was one of the fascinating sides. Yeah, because they sent a lot of people out there to pick up everything they could find, and it's interesting. And I kept top of my head the archaeologist down there who's found some little pieces of debris out in those fields. And one of the things, it's interesting, but one of the most fascinating things, he found old military buttons from shirts from that period. It's like, why in the middle of absolute nowhere would there be some remnants or buttons from shirts from 50 years ago, absolutely in the middle of nowhere? I mean, to me, that's significant. It's like, yeah, there was obviously someone was out there. A lot of people were out there rummaging around. Exactly. And it's one of those fascinating things. Again, simple, keeping it simple. It's like, you probably wouldn't find a button from a military shirt out in the middle of absolute nowhere, so it's again, one of those fascinating things.
Yeah.
Your grandfather was also an author, wasn't he?
No, he always wanted to write a book about things, but he that's me, actually. They have it wrong.
Oh, that's you. Okay.
Yeah, there's unfortunately, like our IMDb, because there's a Jesse Marcel 1, 2, and 3. It's really messed up.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's
you've aged well, Jesse. You've aged well.
For being
you've aged very well.
These monsters keep me going,
man.
It is my grandfather started to write a book back when, and it's actually like 2 or 3 pages. That's as far as he got. But he also had diaries, he had journals, he had different things, those kind of things. But it was, this was a big part of his life. That was from my father, and his wife, Linda Marcel. They had a very, this is obviously very significant. And as we learned as a family that, and this after my father passed away, honestly, is that in visiting Houma, Louisiana, and working on a project for a documentary series, that within our family, they talked a lot about this, a lot more than we thought. But, Houma, Louisiana, we're out of Helena, Montana, quite a distance apart. But they actually talked significantly and deeply about a lot of this Roswell. And my grandpa was always, he was, I don't know if it's not really old school, but he did, and he would have known. He said there's a certain danger in saying too much about what could happen if you brought stuff out. And it was not even so much people around him, but him directly, about what he could say and not say. and obviously in the military, and what rules and regulations he had to go by.
Right.
So he was careful enough when talking to us at the time. Like, we were obviously younger at the time, when in the 70s, when we were all talking about some of the family, but he always would leave an interesting thread to kind of to about the story, that we knew what he was talking about, but he wouldn't directly quote it to us. But
So, Tom,
but
No,
there's
I just think it's really interesting, and my father was very political too. I've got I kind of try to see this through too, because of my family's part in all this with the United Nations thing and General Assembly 33-4-26 and everything. So I picked up the ball and started running with this with my family too, because I wanted to preserve the truth about what really happened, because it does get turned into a circus, and then next thing you know, your family's a laughing stock, when in fact they're significant and they're pioneers and they've accomplished something incredible, and they're part of something incredible also, or extraordinary. And there's so much that early finger pointing and mockery, and so it aggravated me, and that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. But then the more you look into things, and the more people you speak to, like yourself, the more you realize that this is much more common than people really want to believe, and it's much more significant. And the case that your father's involved in, and the case that my father is involved in, and the work Stanton did, and all these, there needs to be a little more attention put on the people that really brought this to the forefront. And
I agree.
yeah, and that star your grandfather has, right? He's in the Want to tell me about that? I mean, that's friggin' remarkable, man. That's like, I'm really happy for your family for that. I mean, that's remarkable.
I think it was great. I and Dan were down in Roswell at the time, and we could talk about what we were doing down there too. But I think it was the record put together, the city put together this idea of a Walk of Fame, and they put a star down for my grandfather, Jesse Marcel, of course, and then Stanton Friedman. So it was a real honor to be able to go down there, and it's kind of memorializes what happened way back when. But it was very significant. I really enjoyed it. I was really happy to be part of it. And that, it was nicer than I thought it was going to be. It worked out really well. They did a really, really good job. The folks down there are great to work with. I mean, can you imagine how do you handle a story about ET and Roswell and UFOs, and yet be a serious community, and with a regular goings on of what it takes to run a city, and you have you have some very interesting folks that are very deeply into this stuff. Some people that are you just never know half the people coming through your town, I'm sure, and they try to accommodate everybody. So I'm sure it's quite a task for the city down there to keep us all together. But it was a smart move to put this star, because I'm sure it'll be taken over the years. It'll be a very popular attraction.
Well, I thought they were very respectful of how they presented everything, how everyone was treated. I thought the city did an incredible job with it. It was very nice to have Jesse's wife Tricia there and his kids, and to be part of that and to see it. I don't know if people know that, but Jesse, through his grandfather's materials, we designed the commemorative coin, the 75th anniversary coin.
No kidding.
Which, you see a lot of people get into this, and they're about the money. They want to get the money. And that's not what we're about. That's not what I'm about. It's not what Jesse's about. We're here to protect and continue to look into what goes on, not just then, but what goes now.
right.
Because even like with the sales of our coin, one of the things we're doing is donating a percentage of that to the city of Roswell, so the festival continue to grow. We think that's important. That's really where this happened, and I was just very impressed with the city's response and how they treated Jesse and his family, as well as the community. I mean, it was really a cool experience.
What I can say is this: the UFO Expo,
Mhm.
which is now a new convention that will be annual in Roswell, will also promote the truth through different avenues,
Mhm.
which is different from the main convention that's in July.
Right.
Seeing that we just celebrated our 75th anniversary of Roswell, correct? And I wish I could have been there, but I wasn't. But I was there in spirit. Tom
Well,
was
that's good.
there. Tom was there, and he was representing me, so that was cool. But in regards to that, Tom was talking about adding some type of commemorative plaque in a Walk of Fame. Tom, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I was actually in a conversation with the city too about furthering that, the Walk of Fame type of thing,
Mhm.
and building on that, with certain families, certain people that are into this for the right reasons, just like your family was. And I found out what that cost, by the way. I don't know if you know or not, but it's like several $1,000s to get one of those put in.
Mhm.
And because of the cost of that, so it's pricey. So not to say too much, but we're hoping that if the convention does well, that we'll be able to also maybe have a vote, have a, a group of people that every year will vote on who should be the next person
Good
to
idea.
have something, maybe not quite at the level of your family. I mean, let's
Mhm.
face it, it's a different thing, but maybe somewhere else, or where we could start to memorialize or bring attention to, those people that were significant and made a difference. Because I don't know about you, but I'm not getting any younger. You know what I mean? I don't spring out of bed anymore. And I'm pounding coffee, and you know what I mean. I'm getting vitamin B12 shots. I mean, I'm in my 60s too. So it seems like there's an awful lot of us that we're getting up there. And so it'd be nice to further that. I really have a lot of admiration for Roswell. There's as well as I do, there's a lot of politics, and like a lot of people into this for the wrong thing, right?
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
say to me, "Oh, you got a park, you must make money." I pay for that park. Do you know how much it costs to maintain a park? I wrote a book. I don't market anything. I do this because I feel a responsibility to save the reputation of my father and the family's reputation,
Mhm.
and to see that it's told honestly. We lost him at 54.
Oh,
My
really?
father was killed at the age of 54
Wow.
on the anniversary of our event going to the UN. So that's again, there's I'd like to. So when I have my conference too, I want to bring out more about my family. I want to
Sure.
bring out more about yours. That's why I was saying earlier, I'd really like maybe you and Dan, because I think Dan and you are working on a project together to
Yeah.
to kind of really do some mining here, and see what
We
might have
really
been
are.
right, and maybe do something for you guys, or just tell me what you need, what you want, and you got it, kind of thing.
Thank you.
Because I think that's important. That's why I do this. I actually, there's a lot of things. I got a limo company, right? I can make $400,
Exactly.
on a weekend just running out my limo, right? I don't need to I don't make money at this any more than you do.
Right.
It's
Oh, neither do I. But
yeah, you do it for the
I'm
right
doing
reason.
it
And
because
there's
the
not that
love
many,
of the subject. I
right,
want to. I have an extreme desire to get the information out
right,
Hmm.
to illuminate people, not necessarily convince them, because in my opinion, it's up to you and Tom and everybody on the panel and in the chat and watching online to make up their own mind. But there is so much going on. We need to share that information and keep it going, because I truly
Yeah.
believe that it's going to take a grassroots movement to bring about true disclosure. It's not going to be the
well,
government.
but they can't make up their mind if what they're reading isn't the truth.
Yeah. It
Well,
is interesting the way things have moved. I mean, the way information is, it's so easy to create, falsehoods in this industry, and people, and back to the thing is there's a lot of people in this that are have passed on, and other people are trying to, pick up the reins of where they left off at, and then some, as on different programming, they'll come up with some hypothesis that, I like to be at least grounded somewhere in possibility regarding with science and how things, and science, there's a lot of things that, if you're willing to believe certain parts of science, then a lot of things are possible. But the reality is, I like to, as an example of how society looks at all this stuff. I was lucky enough to speak with my dad and my sister Denise and Friedman a lot of it at this little convention. I was back. It was for Congress people, and we gave a talk. And I thought, and everybody's in there giving all their different views of what the stuff was. And I got up there and said, I remember as a child, as my grandfather was pulling down bamboo sticks, we go fishing. He was missing one of his fingers, and I talked about that impact of seeing my grandfather missing one of his fingers and seeing there's a table saw sitting there, knowing that that's where he lost his finger at. And that's actually what we talked about. And I had people coming around to shake my hand, because people want that deep personal relationship and that kind of, again, you can make up any video, any paper,
Right,
you can do anything
right.
you want. But when you actually get down to people on that have a direct relationship with it, it's different.
Right.
And there's a lot of stories that need to be told that are out there and that's what, again, with Dan, what we're doing is making it, hey, and Tom, you're in the same kind of shoes as I go.
Yeah.
Like, you can say anything to me, because look at where our family came from. The idea that Roswell, there's something that was, my grandfather believes UFO. So we're very indoctrinated. It's like, you can't tell me something and I'm going to, think that you're crazy, because I've heard it all and I feel comfortable. So that same thing is like you and us, and we can fill those shoes of being a trust. If you don't have to worry about telling us something, because it's not like we're going to think you're whatever. But it's
Right.
an interesting and it's kind of an important place to be.
And it changes everybody. It changes your thoughts. I
Yeah.
came up, my family was very religious. And then after this happened with us in 1969, my father couldn't wait to watch Star Trek. I mean,
Exactly.
the whole perception changes, right? What you think, and what we were told about the Bible, your mind starts going everywhere. But that's how impactful it is. That's how right? That's when it alters your course, your life
Worldview.
course.
Worldview.
It was that deep,
Well,
and
there's just such a interest. I mean, and that's, I think, because when Jesse first talked to me about his family and his story, it was all about the truth. There wasn't any trying to convince me. There wasn't any. I mean, I've got a fair background at detecting deception, and I'm trained in what's called the scientific content analysis of language. I've worked undercover internet crimes for over a decade, homicides, and all the different things that I do to discover the truth. And that's what Jesse's focus was. And where we both connected is we both have a real passion to help people. That's what I've done my entire career. We have a passion about the sciences, STEM, this, and that's what we see an opportunity to do by sharing the truth. And again, not convincing people, so when we created Alien Allure, Jesse has an absolute phenomenal collection of diaries and pictures and images and notes. I mean, the images that were developed from information from his father, which came from his grandfather, those images are really cool. I mean, not just in a sense, but it's like a language. And I've, to be able to take that and essentially convert it to a language, to a font, which Jesse has taken the time to do. You can share these things and you can generate interest about space and exploration and finding out the truth and having civil conversations about it. And that's what we're all about. I mean, imagine if through these kind of discussions, I mean, it's awesome what you both are doing, because imagine what kid listens to this and then becomes the next astronaut.
Right.
It's a continuation. It's not about, people get kind of wild ideas or different things like that. We're not here to promote those kinds of things. My role in this is to try and take some real hard look at information and work through it and be part of a conversation. I mean, I'm a statistics guy. I'm a research guy. And that's what Jesse and I are really about. It's been an absolute honor to meet his family. He's got the coolest family ever.
Thank you.
They're just wonderful people. And they could have gone down what I like to call the crazy road and just try and sell the goofy glasses and the nonsense.
Right.
Pushing paperbacks. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's about doing things the right way. And, we want to get in a position where we can talk all over the place. So people can have the opportunity to hear and to meet Jesse. I mean, Tom, I think it's really cool what you're doing. And it's about legacy,
Right.
and
Right.
I've read a lot of information and I see nothing more in Jesse's grandfather than a man that was incredibly dedicated. And as a veteran myself, he served his country well. He was an outstanding officer. The things that he did in the intelligence world are phenomenal. The roles that he played, somebody that the military would have doubts about their mental capacities would not have served in the missions and overseen the operations that Jesse's grandfather did. They would absolutely not do that.
He deserved to be treated better.
He did, absolutely.
I got to say to you, Dan, thank you for your service.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
I was also a veteran. I was a U.S. regular Army veteran, 4 years.
Thank you for your service. Yeah, I was Army too. Go Army.
Go Army. Yeah, definitely. I was an E5 when I got out.
Yeah. My father, he went through his parents wanted him to be a doctor. He wanted to be a physicist, but he became a doctor because his parents wanted to be a doctor. He ended up being a very, very good doctor. So I think it was a very good thing. He helped a lot of people. But he started in the Navy and he ended up being in every one of the forces. And he ended up by retiring at attack time. So he was Navy, Air Force, Marines, and then Army eventually. So all that thing. So yeah, our backgrounds. I was not in the military myself, but my brother was, and then of course we have a long lineage of our family. And my father, his wish was actually to be remembered what he did for our country more than Roswell, more anything like that. Is basically that he the things he did. So.
Yeah, he's pretty much a legend in UFO circles, believe it or not, and rightly so, in my opinion. I've been meaning to talk to you for quite some time, Jesse, but you have such a busy schedule. It's been difficult to get a hold of you, but I'm glad that we were able to get a hold of you because I wanted to clear up some things because in regards to the alien bodies, the stories go around, oh, there were 3, there were 4, whatever. Were there any?
This is what I can tell you what our grandfather told us, me and my brother and sister growing up. He did not investigate the site where the bodies were, but the people who reported on the bodies can be believed in what they told you, what they said. So again, that's the kind of thing is like, I'm not saying there were bodies, but the people who said their bodies, you can believe what they're saying was true.
Okay,
so
good.
that is the connection. I always tell us one thing again about my grandfather. He'd always smile and wink and tell you there's so much more that I wish I could tell you.
Oh yeah.
And that's the way it was growing up. When we spent some summers with him, and I was lucky enough and my brother and sister out fishing with him on the bayou behind the house, and you got to know that's kind of the relationship we got to know.
Just like my dad. Just like my dad.
Exactly.
Yeah. He was a politician. He was in office. He was backed by Senator Dodd. He was an attorney, and he would say to us, Tom, what happened was much more local than you realized. And it was during the time of the space race. You know, the people that made the goodwill message that was left on the moon,
Mhm.
you know, that the whole scene that was made in our community. That was made
Oh,
at
really?
Sprague Electric, and the people who worked on that, or the workers from Sprague Electric, used to eat in our diner. They used to drop quarters in our jukebox.
That's kind of
Yeah,
cool.
so,
Awesome.
so- but he would do the same thing. You know, I'm trying to make sense of what's going on, and he would kind of do the same thing. And we'd go out target shooting with a little 22 rifle,
Sure.
and in between reloading, you know, and stuff like that, I'd ask him a question, and then he'd go take a shot and he'd say something, you know, off color that he normally wouldn't say, and then look away. And that's
Yeah.
between us, you know, that kind of thing. It wasn't
That
fishing.
exact
we
same
would go
thing.
shoot 22 rifle. Yeah. So when we're in the
Exactly.
woods all by ourselves, he would feel, you know, like he could talk to me maybe.
Mhm.
You know, that bond, those bonding moments that meant everything to me, you know.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to bring this up real quick. There's a lady in the chat by the name of Genevieve. She's coming all the way tonight from France.
Mhm.
She's been pushing the idea of a question that she would like to ask you, which is on the I-beam,
Mhm.
the script that was on there, was it ever determined whether it was close to any language or hieroglyphic text on Earth?
There was some people have related it to a hieroglyph, kind of some similar, and there are some similarities to it. I've talked to some Native Americans that a tribal chief who said the same thing and said, you know, 3 of these are on our scripts, ancient scripts. So there's a smattering of this back and forth. Another theory is that there are electron clouds of atoms, and there's something to them. There's lots of, you know, there's, I did meet with a linguist one time, and he was what do you call him, the symbologist, and he went through the whole thing, and he was like, where do these come from? And I say, because I want to come in a generic sense. Can you make sense of this? And he said that to him, because of the coloring and the size, he was making this reference. It said, you know, everything I'm looking at this, if I go back through and analyze it, it looks like it came from somewhere, you know, someone that was smaller than us, which is interesting. I thought, because he didn't know anything about it being ET or aliens. And I said, well, it was, you know, you know, the idea is this is actually what my grandfather and father saw in the crash debris of Roswell. And he's like, okay. And then he came back and he made this big assumption. He said, well, if I'm going to look at this is what I'm willing to go down this road with you. And his thing was that wherever this came from, the people who wrote it, whatever it was, came from somewhere. It was probably aqueous, where the color was more visible in their wavelength of light. They were looking at it, and they said just by the relationship of the letters, those kind of things. Same thing you do to any language. He came back with a lot of different ideas, and we created something called Roslian, which is totally made up. The name Roslian, just we had to call it something. And what we did was we picked through, you know, you go through all the symbols that my father and grandfather talked about, saw, scribbled, whatever, you know, that put it all together. And then he went through and figured out, okay, which one was most prevalent, which one occurred more often than other ones. And then we put together a language. It was more for fun, and it was interesting, and also a way, how do you put this down and make it easily transferable? You know, how can you actually, when you talk about a symbol, other than just being a thing. So like Dan mentioned, actually made a font out of it, and now it's kind of fun.
It's really fun.
The idea that, you know, my name is Jesse, so we type in Jesse, and it comes out in the symbols that were on the I-beams. And you know, it is a little bit tongue in cheek, but there is a basis for it. It's not totally made up either, but it's kind of fun. So it relates a lot of different things. My father always talked about the seal with the ball in his nose, and because one of the symbols was a pyramid with a ball on top, a round disc on top of it, just like Ra, just like the Egyptian symbol. And so there's a lot of similarities to, you know, different languages and that kind of thing. But, you know, in our languages, I think there's similarities in a lot of our languages, you know, be it French, Japanese, German, whatever. There are similarities. And
Well,
there is a crossover.
To think about too. You know, right now, even if somebody said, "Well, maybe that was something that was written or made up," you know, from whoever built whatever they're trying to push us off as. But those aren't symbols we've ever used, and still don't use those symbols today.
Right. And
Oh, there you go.
they're really, the symbols are really unique. I mean, in a lot of ways. What do we use on the back of the commemorative coin, Jesse? It was the E, wasn't it?
Yeah, the E, yeah, which is
Yeah,
that's
the letter
the one
E.
that my father said there was a lot that was the most prevalent
Real
on all
prevalent.
the. And there, obviously, there's a lot of I-beams, a lot of pieces, but he said that's the one that really stuck out. There's a lot
And
of
we thought that was so important that that's what we put on the back of the commemorative coin, and then Jesse's grandfather is on the front. But the whole font thing it's really is fun. I mean, when you look at a different way that you can do some educational stuff, and those are things that we're working on, and that's going to be a big part of it because we want to be able to share those things in a controlled way with people. So
Yeah.
they are cool. They're pretty cool looking.
And it took years and years to put that together. So it wasn't just a flip. Like I said, we still want to be significant and not just something made up. And there is an idea, and it's like, were these self-generating? Did they represent a course for the craft? Did they represent, who knows what it could have been? But it's interesting if you let your mind go on what this could have meant. Were these all there? Or again, were they created in flight? Is it some process that they represented geographic? That's the symbologists thought that they could also, represent some kind of a map, basically, those kind of things, coordinates and all those things. So,
but Tim and Tom, if you guys want, I don't think Jesse would mind, but if you guys want, I can definitely send you one of the coins.
Yeah,
Cool.
I'd love that. Thank you.
I would
Appreciate
like one too. Yeah. What I was going to ask is, are those coins available to the public?
Yeah. Actually, they are. They can go. We have a website, alienallure.com. They're available on there. And then one of the things that's really important is we donate a percentage of every coin sale to keep the festival going. And those are things that we can talk about with you guys too. I think what you're doing is really cool. I think it's really cool.
Well, we talked about with the record about after the event, making a donation in some way. Mm-hmm. So, I can't think of a better way maybe to do something for you guys.
Yes.
I don't know how big that's going to be because we got to, get things moving here with the event, but it's almost $40,000 invested in the event already.
Yeah, I used to run national conferences for the Department of Justice. I used to work a lot with tribal governments, and those conferences get spendy real quick. And,
it's everything. It's permits, it's this, it's that, it's cleanup, it's deposits, it's so much a chair, it's staff, security. It's like, really,
It's what you guys have done, just a tremendous job. Even tonight, I couldn't be more pleased with how you present. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jesse, but I'm sure we would be interested in helping with you as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think again, it's like I think we're all on the same page. Just keeping it authentic.
That's it.
It's not about creating the next whatever. It's about keeping the stories authentic and real, and the information flowing. Again, instead of being we in business you call it you call them wags, which is basically wild guesses. And people do that when you're trying to figure out the value of companies or wags. There's a lot of wags in the UFO world, and it'd be nice to try to bring it down to presentable, reliable information. People can status users, you can make anything look like the way you want to, but let's try to bring it and make it authentic and make it as real as possible, because this is important for humanity. It's not like where this is just it's more than just fun. It's actually important.
It's history.
Right.
You're part of authentic United States history.
Right.
How many times, Jesse, have you been interviewed, Discovery Travel Channel, whatever it is, right? And I'm trying to say, I want this said, I want that said. This is important, right? Mm-hmm. And how many times have you heard, well, yes, Tom, facts tell, but stories sell. I'm not telling a story.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm introducing facts.
Right.
That's what I'm doing too. I'm trying to introduce facts.
Right. So you're like, well, come on.
And that's actually what this channel is known for, is the ability to present credibility
Right.
and still entertain at the same time, which is very
Well,
difficult.
yeah, and
Make it interesting, sure.
and when you look at one of the things that's really interested me a lot, and because really until I met Jesse, I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. Busy working homicides and a few other things, and I didn't. But one of the things I've really noticed is, the people want to report things that they see. And
Right.
I've had a lot of people now tell me things that they've seen, and oftentimes it's I saw a light in the sky, and well, okay, I've seen a lot of lights in the sky too. I've seen a 737 fly over, or I've seen a helicopter fly over. It's difficult because everything is subjective to what people say. And being a forensic artist, so I do suspect sketches, and I do skull reconstruction, either 3-dimensional or 2-dimensional. I've been trained by the FBI. I've been doing this stuff since the 90s. And the key component to doing what I do in those types of cases is I record in a sketch the truth of what somebody saw. Now, I just don't sit down with them and they tell me this is what they look like, and I don't whip it out and say, here, this is, how's this look? But I have a catalog of facial features. I've got this huge catalog, and I have to be very careful when I ask questions, because just when I ask the question, if I say how tall was the person, I just change their memory, because now I use the word tall. So I use references. In reference to my size, can you describe them?
Uh-huh.
So what I'm working on would be to create an identification catalog so that somebody could go in and pick out, this is the shape. This is the shape in the catalog. And then that picture has a number.
Like the police department.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And because then that way you could look at 1,000 reportings, and of the people that reported them, how many of them picked this shape? How many of them picked this color? How many of them picked this time of day? So now you can start to develop some data and look for consistencies. And it's not contaminated by leading questions.
Right.
And that's a problem, because memory is very easily contaminated. And those are the kinds of things that Jesse and I are working on. And that's really my thing. That's the thing that fascinates me, is
you have to keep it genuine. You just have to listen.
Yeah.
Right.
And be respectful with people. That's one of the things my entire career in law enforcement is, I don't care what people went through or what they did. I'm not the judge.
Who's anybody to judge?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, right. We don't see air, but we know air exists, right? So
people need a safe place that they can talk about this. And I think what you guys are doing is awesome. I think it provides
and
meet other like-minded people to share, and who knows where it goes from there. Hey, I got a question for you, Jesse, if you don't mind. I'm sorry. What you had said a minute ago, it's just something, it struck me. You had said your grandfather never went to actually where the aliens were found.
The reports were that he didn't go there.
So did he go to the crash site, or?
He would have gone to all the crash sites. There would have been 3. Now, am I pulling that out of the air? A little bit. Logically, yes, he would have gone to all. There's no way he wouldn't have. There's no way. I mean, they do segregate, military. They do, like, you know this, so people don't know anything. But the 519, it's a small group of people that were involved in this, very small. And they knew each other very well. And part of that was, like, by him being able to say, well, I'm not going to tell you that there's bodies, but you can believe when they say there are bodies, or, it's that kind of idea. In fact,
there were 2 crash sites, basically.
Actually, in investigating for that book it's been about 6 years now.
3.
There's actually 3, because the fire department came up on some debris. And it's not really, it's kind of funny. It's kind of missed. I don't know if it's on any books, but through us, we found firemen that had found some debris out of it, caught a fire or something like that. And it was related to this crash. There was actually 3 sites.
So, quick question: how big is this so-called weather balloon that supposedly crashed and left all this debris? How big were they trying to sell the public as to how large this weather
Well,
balloon?
the balloons were much bigger than the Rowan targets, but they like I said, in the sun they actually go to they turn like a powder. But
Okay.
yeah, the Rowan target right there, you could hold in your hands one of those. They're not very big and they're very flimsy.
Yet there was
And-
debris in 3 different locations.
Right.
That,
Yeah,
that
there would
required
be.
a fire department and left a big crater.
Right.
Yeah,
You could fit it all in a trash can. Wouldn't be a problem fitting it all in a trash can in a regular 50-gallon
If a
trash
weather
can.
balloon crashed, you'd be lucky to break a branch on a piece of sagebrush. Let's
Yeah,
be
and they do track it, and it's all it's like, it's the story just doesn't fit. Or
How do you
my
turn this?
grandfather made it up,
How do you
and
turn
his
this
people
around?
made it up. That's the it was a huge conspiracy that
Yeah.
everybody in Roswell and all the military, everybody got together and decided, let's make this story up, or there's something to it. And it's just like,
Right.
it's very hard to believe that many people, especially at this right after the Second World War, your mind isn't in this area. It's rebuilding the
Right.
world, but yet everybody got together and made this whole thing up, and a lot of stories from the time all fit other people's stories. So it's just like, again,
You couldn't make this up. You could not make this up.
No.
well, it's back to that
There was
kiss.
too much
It's like,
money in it
makes
to
sense.
make it up. There was the government spent millions
Right.
for a
What I'm
small.
going to say too
So
is,
right. So how do you turn this around? How do you, Dan and you, say, okay, we're going to get our hands around this now, and enough's enough? How do you do that?
What's interesting, for as many stories there are about Roswell out there, there's so many that are still to be discovered. And honestly, a lot of them are through my family that are back there. There's also, I mean, following up on debris, following those there's lots of stories. Some of them, there's a ring of truth to, but it's basically going through that. And then trying to go back again, it's hard to, and Dan can go back a lot better than I can, repackage these stories. But one of these things is like we did this little TV series about my grandfather's diary, and some coding in there and that kind of thing. And there was some stuff was released on the series and some wasn't. It's very fascinating. And so there's a lot to be worked with. And that might be that is one of those places that is right from the pen of my grandfather. And being able to do things in a forensic sense that simply wouldn't have been able to have been done, years ago.
Because what we want to do is bring a lot of the information that Jesse has through his family, the diaries and the different information, and start traveling and sharing it. I think it's about raising awareness and have opportunities where people can see it.
How much of that do you have? Would you be able to hypothetically, make copies of that and bring it to an event? Is that what you're saying? Like bring it to a convention, or are you talking about like having a website to show that, or what are you thinking?
We're talking about basically we might be our first one might be in London, and that's basically going to be where look at it this way. It's kind of like there's lots of mysteries around this, and there's evidence and those kind of things, and take somebody to one of these talks that I and Dan will do that maybe is not into the UFO world, but they're into mysteries. And it is a mystery. There's lots of information here. Maybe they will glean something out of it that we haven't, that other people haven't, or whatever. But it'll be basically to gain more information, and it's going to be more intimate. You'll be able to view parts of pages and those kind of things. However we have that set up, but it'll be a lot more of an intimate setting. And we're probably going to do it all over the world. There's over the years, I can't tell you how many governments have gotten hold of me wanting to look at crash sites, crash debris that they have, and then compare and contrast it to what we've learned about Roswell. So there is so much out there that can be gotten out of. And whether it's right or wrong, people feel like they can us to do this. So we're going to really, in a worldwide sense, go after this again from that authentic standpoint and look at it. Don't come from the idea that it's a UFO with bodies. It's something. Let's start there and see where it leads us to.
Do you and anyone have pictures of the actual crash site from 1947? Correct.
What's that?
Does anyone have an actual photo of the crash site?
I have never
from 1947.
I've never seen one.
Damn it.
Neither have I.
Ever see what? And there have to be. There's no question. There has to be when they're assessing the whole thing. There is. I liked, and this is probably coincidence, but my father always said, people, where did it go? And he always said, there's probably some warehouse, and in a crate or a bunch of crates is this stuff, and it's stuck. And then 10 years later, 8 years later, Indiana Jones comes out, and it's exactly how my father talked about it. It's kind of a fun coincidence, but it's out there. It is out there, and that's part of that investigation. And they want to, and we might be able to open a door that other people won't. We don't know, but this is the right step to get going, though.
Don't you think they bury a lot of fact within fiction, including movies and books?
I mean, once in a while, not always, but once in a while, it's amazing how a sci-fi movie will depict an actual event but it might have been that sci-fi movie took place long before the actual event happened or afterwards or whatever. But we're the same way. I'm a big sci-fi nut. I grew up watching Star Trek. 2001: Space Odyssey was my favorite sci-fi movie.
I am too.
I am too.
And my dad always, when he first kind of introduced the story to us as kids, that's one of the things he did. I mean, we were, maybe typical or untypical family, lived out, has a nice place out in the woods. And I always remember we had, family dinners were a very important thing. And TV would be pushed up the end when it was Star Trek night.
Yeah.
And it would be flipped on. This is the original series. And he would talk about, he said that, this really happened. He said, this is science fiction, but the premise of this really happened.
Yeah.
And that was actually some of the earliest things that my father shared with us as kids.
Right. It's giving me chills because my dad used to do the same thing. He was like,
it's that, who doesn't love, the idea of some of this stuff. And it's kind of, I honestly don't know if my grandfather was deep into sci-fi or not. I don't think we ever talked about that, but definitely it adds wonderment. It adds, like with Roswell, how many astronauts were based at Wright Pat and those kind of things that became astronauts that NASA blew up after this. It's like a lot of those people. So I always try to look at it very optimistically. This changed people's lives, and people thought, maybe there is something to this, and it's enough that I want to go out and check it out. And they became
that NASA used to be in Massachusetts. Did you know that?
What's that?
NASA used to be in Massachusetts.
There was exactly. There's a direct relationship there.
Yeah.
And some of these stories, I mean, it might be, and it's different today, but back, I would say more in the 80s, people like, if you believe in UFOs, you're just a nutcase, that kind of thing. Now that was always pushed. They did a very good job keeping it with intentional or not, they did a very good job where people didn't want to talk about it.
Right.
But
shame and embarrassment is a great way to control people.
Yeah. And they did but now it's like, it's almost, I wouldn't say it's exactly like this, but it's almost strange if you don't believe there's something out there. Yeah. And there is something out there.
You have to be an absolute idiot to think we're alone. I mean, whether or not you believe what I tell you or someone else tells you, just look at, we've had, and I say this all the time, we've had like 5 or 6 global extinctions, and yet we have
over history.
We have 8.9 million animals today. And our Earth,
where they're coming from?
Access. We've got we've got salt water, brackish water, fresh water, desert. We got all kinds of climates, so we can house all these species at the same time. So I've always said from day one that Earth is our galaxy's arc, but they're coming from somewhere, right? They have to come from somewhere. They can't be like one zebra, one female zebra, one female. They would have all been inbred and died off anyway because they would have gotten sick and died off. It had to be stopped.
Well, I agree. I mean, there is it's just like I like to steal some words from the Jurassic Park. Life. I think it's something like life looks for a reason.
Finds a way.
Life finds a way, and there's no reason why that isn't throughout our universe. It's like they're finding weird animals at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. I mean,
all the time
in volcanoes that you would think would be impossible, but life finds a way. Exactly. Right. throughout
And
the
so,
universe.
and then where people are, they're talking about a Bigfoot or something. Everybody's, oh, it's impossible. Yet we find millions of species all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Even
it's not
extinct species.
Yeah.
right.
Oh, they show up. Yeah, this animal's been extinct forever. Well, look what just showed up. But,
Yeah, like the
it's
coelacanth.
even the name of our, Jesse and I have been kicking around names for our tour that we want to put together and we're taking our time to do it because we want to do it right. This is, we want to make it enjoyable for people,
Right.
And have conversations. Because what are we coming up with, Jesse? Truth tour?
Yeah,
Is that what
truth,
we're talking about?
yeah, something like that. I mean, it'll be, if we want to do it, I'd like to have something, because I like to bring it in because it's a mystery.
Yeah.
It's like, help us solve a mystery. Help us solve, because somebody could walk in and this is something that my father has had in his life, and opens it up and there's something that, it's been in our family for 100 years. I mean, it's all out there, but it's still a lot of people. And I appreciate the government saying, we're going to have a call-in line. If you see something, say something. If we're UFO wise, that's good.
Everybody wants to give their private information to the government, right? Nobody's hesitant about it.
See,
that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
See, everybody wants to call the government with their UFO reports, right?
Yeah,
And their
I mean,
alien encounters,
let's just,
right? But it's kind of like paying Amazon. You can pay them immediately, but if you want to get your money back, it takes a while, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of like with the government. If you report something, it'll take a long time before you get an answer.
Well, and just the opportunity to meet other people, because I worked a lot of homicides in my career. I worked a lot of really bizarre cases, and I didn't solve those myself. I mean, my claim to fame is I solved a case. We got a first-degree murder conviction and a no-body homicide. And the guy's last name happened to be Capone. That was the killer. So, I got to be the cop that put Capone away for murder. But I accomplished that by interviewing people, by talking to people, and when I started that case, and Detective Jackie Nichols, I call her a pit bull on a pork chop. She doesn't like that, but that's what I do. We started that case. We were told by every agency we worked with initially, there's no body. You can't prove this case. And in my first contact with Capone, he said, well, you can't do nothing. There's no body. Yeah. That's the challenge for me, and when Jesse talks about this as a mystery, that's what I do. I'm a mystery solving guy. And that's what we want to have some fun and engage people. And it's a way I can continue to help educate people and provide a safe people for, to have a conversation.
Right. That's along the lines of what we're doing as well.
Yeah, it's awesome what you guys are doing. I love it. Absolutely love it.
We're starting a website called Experiencers Database, which is going to focus on the United States first and then hopefully go global in regards to everyone who claims they've had an alien abduction, missing time, body marks, trace evidence in their yard, whatever. And we want to categorize it, put it into a chart. We're going to have questionnaires that people answer. We're going to have counseling groups. We're going to have regression hypnotherapists. We're going to have experiencers that are well known, such as Tom Reed. He's going to be hopefully on our panel. We're going to have a professional panel of people that are all experiencers. We're going to look at every avenue, and not just alien abduction claims, but anything alternative to the claim of alien abduction as well. So in a package that you can open and hopefully find answers. So we're doing the same thing you are, but instead of doing the UFO angle, we're doing the abduction angle.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting. No, that's interesting. Yeah. And, to me, that kind of stuff is fascinating. And, if you need somebody, let me know because
Yep, I will, because
if
we
you
need
get
professionals.
if
Yes,
you
we
get
do.
my specialty is again, I'm trained in what's called scientific content analysis of language. It's about evaluating written language. I can do verbal, but written is better. And if you got a case, somebody that is really kind of interesting, so to speak, let me know. I'm mysteries are my thing, and
Okay.
as
Will do.
as Jesse and I grow what we're doing, because Jesse knows a bit about this stuff too. He knows
Oh,
No,
yeah.
he knows a hell of a lot more than I do.
That's why we brought him on, because we
Yeah.
know he knows
I'm
his
just the
stuff.
mystery solving guy.
yeah,
It'd be great to create a universal database.
It
yes.
would be.
That's what
Create those parameters. It's the same throughout the world, so
right.
everybody's using the same set of variables.
Right, exactly. Because the reason is because the government will never come clean.
No.
That's my opinion. They will never tell you.
Has
that they-
anyone
They'd have to have
seen
a reason to. There'd have to be a
Obama's
reason
birth
to.
certificate? There's your answer. Right?
Yeah, there has to be some,
They're going to expose the biggest secret of the night now. Never going to.
No.
Okay, I do have one
Tricky
secret
faucet.
picture, one secret photograph that I do need to put up. And
All
I always remember that my mom would say to me, "Oh, when you're 18, wait till I show your baby photographs." Well, here's
Is this a baby picture?
baby photograph of Jesse himself.
Oh,
What? Oh, that's me and my brother and sister. Wow, we had to be. Well, my brother must have been maybe one there, which would have made me three.
Cute picture. Cute picture.
okay.
And the big
I
shoes on my
gotta get a
sister.
picture of that.
Had to show that because I thought it was a very good picture. And the fact is that we saw you at the beginning, and now we see you continuing through life. And myself and Tom, I'm sure Tom is involved in this comment.
That was deep. That was really deep.
Yeah, you are actually making a great impact on the community, and we need you to continue to do so. And Dan, you as well.
Oh,
Well, thank you.
absolutely. I mean, you guys, it's authentic. It's not just a case that you hear about that, even though it's factual or important. I mean, you're connected to the biggest UFO case in the entire world, and it's odd that you're not the one people come to for information or facts. It's other people. Oh, I heard this, and they write this, and next thing you know, you're reading this book, and half of it's not even accurate. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's like when we got together. Part of that is that, and it's funny enough. I've had meetings with other people are saying, "Why aren't you guys out there talking?" And it's kind of like your life gets in the way,
Right? Sure.
And you just do your
families,
regular stuff,
birthdays, kids.
Exactly, but this feels right now, and
it really does.
And it was obviously it wasn't for us, but having that star down in Roswell was kind of kickoff. I mean, it was kind of a great beginning.
That was quite an honor.
Yeah, it was
Again, it was the first.
Yeah, I just loved it, and it was like it was a great honor to be able to be invited to go down there and represent my grandfather and father and that kind of thing. But it really, I mean, it's almost like it's the beginning of something great. It's the beginning of the evolution. It was
well, now we're waiting for you to get your star, Jesse.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but
I'll tell you though, when
maybe a plaque.
As people get to meet people get to meet Jesse and meet Jesse's family, you will not find more solid, genuine people. I mean, I'm a pretty good judge of people, and if nothing else, just getting to know them, and I mean, his two kids, his daughter and son, they're incredibly intelligent. But I watched them interact with all types of people down there in Roswell, and it's that same treat people well. But Roswell really should consider this is like the first family of Roswell, the Marcels. the really, and it's time for them to be acknowledged. I mean,
What would Roswell be without their family?
A town in a really hot area that's
Well,
dry.
Desert town.
Not a
with
lot
no
going on.
properties, with affordable property.
Yeah, but and we met so many neat people down there.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the conversations and people, people find out what I did in my career and stuff like that. They always, I get to hear about a lot of crimes and different stuff like that. But it's so fun to talk to people.
Yes.
We met. It's like the police department down. Those guys were phenomenal. I think I got more challenge coins from Roswell than I have in any place in my career. But what they did was just so special. And it was really cool to be a part of that. And I think Jesse and I are going to be doing a lot of things, and just meeting you two, I mean, is awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating to hear what you're doing. And Tom, I guarantee I'll be learning a lot more about you. I'm super interested.
I like. I'm heterosexual. I have long walks on the beach.
Yeah, I might be actually Zoom.
I love it, Tom. I love it.
Yeah, it's late.
We're gonna get along well.
Yeah, yeah. I was really. I'm so glad that you came on with Jesse. I wanted to have him on for a while, and I've always had an enormous amount of respect for him and his family.
Oh, thank you.
I have, and we've known each other about 7 years or so, but we go to happy hour. Can you imagine that conversation?
Oh, I can imagine happy hour with you guys. Oh,
when you were talking about family, it's like, yeah. I mean, I've been married for 22 years now. I say that carefully because I could be right, 22 years.
Yeah.
But I mean, my wife came to us, have no idea about any of this stuff.
Oh, wow.
And she's become very involved at a personal level and a belief, etc. And I when we did the stuff, they came out with that book release. That was a while ago. My kids were in grade school, and they would, trying to, like, I don't know what the world would think about that. My kids, I didn't want to infuse that in their life at school. But one of the teachers recognized our family, whatever, and all of a sudden we're signing books to the teachers, and it became a very warm and welcome idea about this life and about Roswell, and it was just about Roswell, but just about life in the universe. Yeah. And one of my favorite things, like pulling up to pick up my kids on the side, and these kids would run up and bang on the window. Hey, did you see this? They talked about Roswell. Hey, did you see that? I mean, there was all very excited. There was nobody was scared or intimidated. There was none of this fright. It was all this excitement. It was fun. And really, their whole school, they pretty much all embraced the whole thing. And that's that generation. I mean, that was a number of years ago, but that whole thing of, it's not so much, before it was like, be scared of your shadow, stay away from this, whatever, you're a fool if you believe in it. And now it's like people want, like, sounds pretty cliche, the old X-Files, but, people do want to believe in it. They want to see evidence and proof, but they're of the mind that, believe there's something out there. What can we find? So it's a total mindset.
And we have a lot of a different group now. We've got a lot of, back in the 70s, even, I think only 15 to 20% of children even went on to college.
Oh, sure.
Now it's like 70% are going to college. They've got the internet in their hands.
Yeah.
They're more astute. The information's there. They just need, something to trigger that interest, to look into it and go, my God, I had no idea.
No, you're right, and there's all, and I don't know if it plays into it. If I talk like my son's, he did great. He one of those brilliant kids, and now he's going in, but he's all into AI and absorbing information. The stuff the kid does, it's like he went on. If you don't mind me going off subject here a little bit, but he was showing me this thing he's working on it, and he does this for fun. And I said, do you realize people get paid a lot of money for what you're doing? But he went through and figured out an algorithm. So he goes into YouTube and studies all, programs, all the YouTube channels that have to do with gaming. And at any one time, at any one moment, he can tell you what the most popular game being played is based on millions of sites. And he wrote this for fun.
Yeah.
And it's like that kind of genius, which I don't pretend to have, is the kind of thing, is that next step. And his thing is gobbling up information. That's all he does. is in for all he wants is what he wants for Christmas is hard drives. Just keep.
This is your son? This is your son?
That's what he's about, and that is
He's a sharp kid.
he is.
So I want to tell you something too, which is really kind of ironic. My son did the same thing. He found a this interesting mathematical equation, and you can add, subtract these bunch of numbers and not tell me anything, and I can tell you the one number you subtracted from the answer and all this kind of thing just by doing it, but without you telling me a single number. So, a matter of fact, we'll do it after we get off the air here. If you got a calculator,
sure.
But my son did the same thing, and it's weird too because he beat an unbeaten chess pro when he was in 5th grade. All kinds of weird. Yeah,
like my daughter in this, she's in a debate, in the high school debate, and I'll never forget because brought a tear to my eye when we're sitting in her school because she takes it to heart though, and she scares people because she's very strong, and you wouldn't think she's a tiny little girl, but she went through and they said, okay, like in high school you get 400 points, or I don't know what the number is. As debate is average. If you do really good, you should finish your career in high school with about 400 points or whatever that is.
Okay.
And Audrey Marcel in her first year got like 387. It's like she kicked through the country. She's like, she writes. It's one of those things, and it's like there is a certain element. It's like, and I'm not saying it's right versus wrong, and understanding what that means, but she's able to analyze the situation and react to it very much better than I could, honestly. And she's a junior in high school, and the world they're growing in, and I'm hoping that what we're talking about now is part of that idea of the immensity of possibility.
Yeah,
and that they don't restrict themselves in any way, shape, or form. Everything's possible.
It's
kind of start there.
Yeah, there's almost like those I know that have had in their families line, if you will, an encounter. It seems like their children just excel, for some reason, and I don't know what to make of that really. But my son was people to people. He was sent to he represented his school for mathematics. That kind of, it was
wonderful.
He was brilliant, and I know he didn't get it from his mom. So and I do okay, but he's like, my God, just brilliant, and there's been some times where he's actually we talked about this on a show back, and maybe a couple of months ago, where he called me up and he was in a panic. Daddy, you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'll check the doors, because when he calls up and he's nervous about something, I take it, I take it seriously, because he's, and so I checked the house and everything, and he was so upset that he drove 45 minutes to make sure I was okay. And when he turned the corner, I live on a corner, there was an SUV that was on its side, and this guy was hanging out the sunroof. He was dead. And he had actually gotten there just as the police were getting there. So he almost kind of felt something before it ever happened. And interesting. Again, you go, is that a coincidence? What do you make of it?
But interesting.
All kinds of, and then this mathematical stuff, and like you said, this ability
synchronicities too.
Yeah, that's a good word for it.
Don't happen to my neighbor, so there's something to it. But anyway,
yeah.
So yes, UFO Expo. If you want some more time, or you want to come in person, we'll talk more.
Sounds good.
Let's chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so, while we're talking about that, I'm going to play the ad real quick. Here it goes. There we go.
Well done.
I like that. Thank you, Tim.
Well
Thanks.
You're welcome.
So
anything to help the cause, because I found out just was it yesterday, Tom, when we were talking, that I might be zooming into the conference. So because I can't be there physically, I'm going to zoom in.
Yeah.
So I'll be a presenter that way.
Well, thanks for the plug.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the money. It hasn't come yet.
I love it.
No, I don't need
I
anything
love
from
it.
Tom. I do it because we're friends
I appreciate it.
and because I believe in what he's doing.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Definitely.
Are we still on or are we off now?
No, we're still on.
Okay. All right.
Okay, because all I did was show an ad.
Oh,
Now,
okay. Just not sure. Yeah.
let's go around let's do this.
I don't want to say. I don't want to say something, off color.
No, we will wrap things up by going around the panel and getting last thoughts. Tom?
Oh, I just, I think it's time to hear more from you, Jesse, and your family, and a little less from everyone else who wants or thinks they're an expert. You know what I mean.
Mhm.
And so I really appreciate you coming on, and
Yes.
maybe we have you back too, right, Tim? We're still got some,
you're more than welcome to come back anytime, Jesse.
yeah, both of you.
Both of you, yes.
Don't forget Dan. Dan didn't have a whole lot. He sat very patiently, Tim.
No, I saw him down there, but
Yeah.
I was waiting for him to jump in.
Oh, that what it was? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I remember I'm the guy that evaluates information. So trust
So
me,
that's
I was,
what he
I
was
was working
doing.
hard tonight,
Wow, you were
Scrutinize.
You did a really good job. A lot of people in the chat room really appreciated what you had to say, Dan, and we thank you for coming. We do.
Seriously, thank
Any
you.
last words, Dan?
Oh, I just think it's awesome what you guys are doing. It's been a real honor to partner up with Jesse and his family. And, as people talk about this or, they can, not to plug, but they can go to our website. I'm always happy to talk to somebody, I wasn't a cop for all those years to be a butt. It was all about helping people. That's still what I do. I still volunteer with Anti-Predator Project, trying to find missing people. It's about helping people. And I think this can grow into helping people because people need a place that they can be safe. And you guys are part of that. Jesse's part of that. And sharing an experience can be really healthy for people. My specialty in the world is working with people that have experienced trauma. And if somebody's been through this and seen things, there's trauma associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's grow what we started tonight. Let's grow this into really making a difference for people.
Man, well said. We're trying.
Jesse?
Thank you for having us on. It's very interesting. It's great seeing you, Tom. Actually, I look forward to sitting down sometime across the table or something like that, rather than always long distance stuff. But but no, it was good. Like I said, people come up. What hasn't been said about Roswell? Well,
Right,
actually,
exactly.
I mean, a lot has, but there's so much more, and it's also like. It's not saying that like what I and Dan are doing, and I'm so proud to be part of what Dan does, and I'm so excited that he. And the idea is that we're going to get stuff, and it's going to help people. This is not just a churn and burn operation. It's very exciting to do something very positive, and like I said, Roswell is just going to lead us to many different things. Like I said, I've had governments, a fair number of governments that want to get me involved in what they're doing or what they've seen, and it's always been kind of. I can do it as, I'm an amateur, it's like, I was involved in the story, but can I really do it? But with someone like Dan on board and maybe some other people, we can actually give it give it what it needs or what it respectfully. So, I can just tell from my head, well, that looks interesting. I was shown some foil that you hold to light and it becomes clear. It's metal, and there's some interesting stuff out there, but it'd be fun to trace that down and see if real or fake or indifferent, whatever, is to put that with Dan, put together a process to scrutinize to really study each of these things. Again, it's all over the world. I get asked sometimes, well, it sounds like most of the UFO sightings are in the United States. I said, well, not really. I think we have a big media center, so you hear about it more.
Right.
But I mean, the stuff. From Brazil to Uruguay to all these the stuff, the way that people look at this is it's interesting. And some countries are very much like a sighting is something, it's almost a religious experience. It's something amazing, it's something to be admired, not anyway. So it's interesting. So it's basically just opening up, and the more people that want to become involved, then all the better if we can help create that foundation, if Roswell is part of that foundation, and the same thing with Tom, it's a, let's do this thing. It's very exciting. It's a great step forward.
We'd like you to keep in touch because perhaps we can link our database with your database once everything is established, because the more information we get and the more we bring together, the more we can push true disclosure, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Couldn't agree more.
Yep. I love that concept, because that's the more centralized and consistent reporting system you have, the better data you get.
Yeah.
Right.
And as long as people trust it, and that's where I don't think the Department of Defense is going to get a lot of headway, because, hey, it's not where people feel warm and fuzzy. It's like when I was in law enforcement, if somebody asked me, how should I handle, if I did something wrong, don't talk to the cops. That was always my advice.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everybody on the panel for being here this evening. I want to thank everybody who participated in the chat room and everybody who watched online, and from all of us.